Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and it looks like Nintendo might just be testing out new mechanics for an epic Zelda remake that I think, and others likely will also think, has to do with this both theorized and rumored The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time remake for Nintendo Switch 2. Now keep in mind, we don't know exactly what this is, but it's very interesting, and I gotta tell you, I went into this with a lot of doubt, a lot of skepticism, but as I paid more attention, I looked deeper into it, and I gave it a chance, I've become a lot more open to this legitimately being something of meaning here, and it's pretty darn exciting. It could be suggesting some interesting and ambitious improvements to the next Zelda game that might just be a remake for Ocarina of Time, which is what we're going to be diving into today. Do you find yourself feeling tired, unable to take a good nap during the day from wherever you may be? Then perhaps you are in need of a soft, comfortable sleep mask that blocks out all light. Fortunately, Manta Sleep, the sponsor for today's video, has just that, a quality sleep mask. This sleep mask has super soft, comfy cushions that cover your eyes and block out all light. It's easy to adjust to different sizes, and it feels great to wear, and it's helped me personally fit in just a bit more rest during my days. So if you're looking to improve your sleep and energy, check out the Manta Sleep Mask using the link in the description below with my code SLEEPRESTART. So this discovery here, that at first I had doubt, but upon closer inspection I now think may actually mean something, was made by Mike Odyssey. I will be linking his video in the description below, but I'm also going to be trying to dive even deeper on this subject here. What he found were some recently published patents from Nintendo. Now hold on, yes, I understand. Many Nintendo patents that we see don't necessarily mean that whatever that patent is about, we're going to see materialize in the future. This is true. However, also many times patents have meant something. Here's a recent example. We had a patent showing that Nintendo was working on Joy-Cons with magnetic technology. And so this patent was insight into some of the things Nintendo was testing on and thinking about, which is ultimately about Joy-Cons using magnetic technology. And what happened? Well, Nintendo came out with the Nintendo Switch 2, and the new Joy-Cons attach magnetically. So this is one instance where a patent actually meant something, and it was insight towards what Nintendo would do in the future. But in regards to The Legend of Zelda, we've actually seen quite a bit of this as well. So as you see here from this article from Game Reactor, back in 2021, there were different patents coming out that people were able to extrapolate had to do with The Legend of Zelda. They were showing off some interesting things that actually made it into the final game. So for example here, from those patents back in 2021, we see that Nintendo was working on different sort of positions that Link could take even in the air when using his bow, something they took advantage of in Tears of the Kingdom. And also working on different things he could do in the air as well. These extra animations and gestures and mechanics were things we saw Nintendo file and publish patents for before the release of Tears of the Kingdom, before they revealed all these things. Some things we had an idea on, others we did not. And so point is, yes, there is plenty of history showing that Nintendo has filed patents that have been an indication for what's to come in the future. And ultimately, the reason this happens is because Nintendo does need to file these patents to protect the right of their technology that they've been researching and developing on. As I said earlier, it doesn't always materialize into a product, and if it does, it may show up in a form we did not expect or happen many years later. But what patents ultimately are evidence of is Nintendo working on certain concepts that they want to make sure they have security and exclusive right to use moving forward. And so, what did Mike find? Well, he was looking at the US Patent Office, right? And when you search Nintendo, there's a variety of patents that come up. Not all of them are from Nintendo, right? But some of them are. And as you see here, the publication date was October 14th. I'm recording this on October 15th. This all came out literally yesterday. And so I looked through some of these, and I found some that do look like something for The Legend of Zelda. So here we have a Nintendo patent, and as you see here, this looks like different things we saw in Tears of the Kingdom, like the crafting, the fusing. If we scroll through, that's like for Switch 1. So, okay, this looks like Tears of the Kingdom stuff, right? The crafting, the building, all that stuff, the Ultra Hand mechanics. We're seeing all this imagery showing stuff for that, right? Like, there's these different tools. You have the tires, you have maybe cannons or blocks, you have the fans, you have the giant glider. Like, clearly, this is something that is very related to what they did in Tears of the Kingdom. So why are we seeing it now? Well, Nintendo may simply want to continue securing their right to have this tech, but they filed stuff like this in the past already, right? So why are they doing it again? Maybe they do have plans to possibly use this technology again in the future. But this doesn't really necessarily mean anything for Ocarina of Time, at least not from what we've seen so far. But there's more. So here is another patent that came out same day, and we see that same stuff of the gliding, the falling animation, just like we saw years ago before Tears of the Kingdom came out. And so it leads one to wonder, again, why are they filing this? Are they planning another Zelda game that's going to use a lot of this similar technology? And that might be the case. But still, nothing here is screaming, oh, they are using this to test out mechanics for a Ocarina of Time remake. And I agree, there's nothing here that's like, oh, this has to be for the Ocarina of Time remake we've been theorizing on. It just shows things that we already saw basically in Tears of the Kingdom. There may be some subtle differences there, but it's with this next patent here where I actually think something may have been found that is a very interesting indication that this may be tied to this theorized and rumored Ocarina of Time remake that may come out either next year or the year afterwards, either for the 40th anniversary or to follow up the live-action Zelda movie, one or the other. That's the theory. But as you see here, okay, so it looks like they're working on just like elements to interact with the screen and the character and the camera, different indications to the environment, right? So you see the character here with this image, there's an arrow pointing towards the stairs, nothing too crazy there. However, as we scroll through, here we see an image, and it appears to be in some sort of ornate building, right? We see a painting upstairs, and there's a staircase here, and this image is depicting kind of like the interaction of the character, the camera being able to swivel, the environment, a point of interest that the camera is targeting, which, yeah, that sounds a lot like the Zelda tech we've seen before. Now, this is still not the most compelling part, just stick with me here, but I'm going to mention that this does appear to be like an ornate building with paintings, with staircases, and there does appear to be this focus on elements that are being depicted on screen and taking further advantage of Z targeting, which, by the way, was popularized and many strides were made in this technology and how to use it for games with The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. So seeing Nintendo go back to this tech and sort of trying to maybe fit in some extra little nuances as to how they go about using this technology for a modern game is interesting, especially if it is maybe for an Ocarina of Time remake. But again, this is not the most compelling part, so let me continue. Scrolling down, this is the part that actually sold me. This right here. So, what are we looking at? What we're looking at here is the character now moving to the next level of this building with this ornate structure, right, where we see this painting, and we also see kind of like a glitter, and there is one big sort of shiny part around the character, revolving around. There's still kind of like a point of interest with the painting, and then when we continue again, that glitter moves from the character to the painting. This glittery, sparkly thing. And this is where I think it connects to The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. Most games don't have like a glittery like thing that revolves around the character and then moves to a certain point of interest that you're targeting. But it does in Ocarina of Time. You have Navi, the fairy, that is a sparkly little creature that revolves around you. And when you are Z targeting a point of interest, Navi then goes to that point of interest and revolves around that instead, and you see all the sparkliness of it around whatever that is. This here is very similar to that, but then going a step further. As I've mentioned, this appears to be kind of like maybe like a building with some ornate structures, and there's painting. That reminds me of, what? The Forest Temple from Ocarina of Time, where there were the paintings of the pose, there were staircases, there were different levels, there were these rails, there was an ornate, ancient, sophisticated structure to this environment. And so, while these patents are super simplified, and they're being done in a very generalized way to not necessarily leak or showcase too much, there are some interesting connections here that definitely feel very Zelda, very Ocarina of Time-esque, which is exciting to think about. So, what does any of this mean? Well, it might still mean nothing, to be clear, because sometimes Nintendo simply puts out these patents because they're working on concepts and ideas that they want to protect, but they may not necessarily use them. However, given what we've seen with prior Zelda patents, most recently with these Tears of the Kingdom ones, and how we're seeing with some of these other patents, there's a similarity here. We're seeing some of the different Tears of the Kingdom mechanics again with these new patents that were just filed. It has me wondering that, yeah, maybe they want to use these again, and then we will also see another patent that seems to be connected to the whole Navi Z targeting element, with maybe even like Poe-like paintings and a forest temple from Ocarina of Time filed on the same day. It has me thinking that maybe all these patents are for the same Zelda project, which is the thing we've been theorizing for such a long time, this Ocarina of Time remake. So, what might this mean for a game like this? Well, it would further suggest that this is going to be an ambitious project. This is going to be something that's going to have actually new elements added to it, like incorporating some of the Breath of the Wild mechanics and physics possibly. That could be pretty crazy to kind of see in a game like that, and then seeing them further improve upon already some of the big concepts and mechanics from Ocarina of Time itself, but modernizing it. It's all potentially hinting at that they're going for something bigger here. If they're going to be incorporating mechanics from modern Zelda games into a remake of Ocarina of Time, how is that going to change about the environment? I would imagine that all the dungeons are going to be redesigned. I imagine that we'll even have to reconsider how we go about exploring Hyrule Field. Now, I don't think they're going to make this like a massive open-air game. The big idea with this remake is that it's meant to be a little bit of a stopgap for the next big open-air Zelda a few years later. But this still could be something that's still fairly ambitious, pretty exciting, and is something that's going to really excite the Zelda fan base and get a lot of people to pick up a Switch 2 for this particular game, especially with Zelda's 40th anniversary next year and the live-action movie the year after. Now, if you've gotten to this point in the video, let me simply point out that I have this goal to reach 60,000 subscribers by the end of the year, so if you find yourself enjoying my videos, I would very much appreciate your support. And for all those returning subscribers, I thank you for watching all this time. And I think it's important to consider how this further supports the idea that this supposed remake would be more of an ambitious one. Because there's also the possibility that what we're talking about here, if it's even anything real, which I do think it is definitely something real, but it could possibly be just like maybe The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time 3D upscaled into HD or 4K, and that would be it. That technically could be true. Like, yes, we've talked about how there is a lot of evidence to support this theory for this Ocarina of Time remake. We have the fact that Nintendo does like to include something ambitious Zelda early on for every generation. We do have the 40th anniversary next year. We have the live-action movie. We've seen the Zelda Lego set. We've heard about a new Zelda Lego set that's supposed to be about Ocarina of Time. Like, yeah, there's a lot of cross-promotion and merchandising. It feels like Nintendo's building up to something here. We've seen all the Ocarina of Time references. Aonuma, who has a long history, and he's even confirmed himself that he has teased future Zelda titles, or he's teased Ocarina of Time something in the future twice. There's certainly a great deal of mounting evidence, and I haven't even covered it all here. But how much of this evidence tells us that this is going to be like an ambitious project, and not just something that's maybe just like a little bit better than what we've seen before? Well, these patents could be suggesting them working on adding new mechanics, modern mechanics to the game. That would suggest something more ambitious. And then we also consider a rumor we talked about a few months ago from Nash Weedle, who has leaked so many things throughout this year and gotten it right, such as Virtual Boy coming to NSO, Mario Wonder Switch 2 Edition, Indiana Jones coming to Nintendo Switch 2, the whole concept of the Switch 2 Edition, Metroid Prime 4 having mouse controls, Donkey Kong Bonanza instead of 3D Mario this year. All these things we've heard from this person, and they've also heard about there being an Ocarina of Time remake. They've heard about it for a couple of years already, and that a couple of years ago they went through some sort of art style change. The fact that Nintendo would go through some sort of shift like that also suggests that this would be more of an ambitious project that would require an art style change. So if we're seeing these patents that somehow seem linked to Ocarina of Time, there may be new mechanics, there may be a new modern art style for the Nintendo Switch 2. That suggests something that is huge, something ambitious, something that's going to excite a great deal of the fan base. Something that I imagine would probably sell 10, maybe 20 plus million copies here, so would likely be worth the budget for this? Perhaps? I think so. But what do you all think? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget, you can use my code SLEEPRESTART when checking the link in the description below for the Manta Sleep Mask. This is AndresRestart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I will see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.